lost in space with no way home, until a human whispered, "I found you." The quantum entanglement. Dr. Lyra Cassini's fingers hovered over the holographic display, the quantum field equations spinning in three-dimensional glory before her eyes. 6 months on Theseus 7, the most remote research outpost in the Helicon system, had narrowed her world to this lab, these equations, and the maddening sense that she was missing something fundamental. Still communing with the quantum gods? Dominic Reeves appeared in the doorway, the station's chief engineer balancing 2 steaming mugs of synthetic coffee. His perpetual half-smile softened the weathered lines of his face, earned from decades of EVA work before accepting this posting. "They're being particularly cryptic today," Lyra replied, accepting the mug gratefully. "The entanglement patterns aren't stabilizing across the model." Dominic leaned against her workstation, studying the swirling equations with polite interest. Though not a physicist, his practical engineering mind often spotted patterns she missed. "What happens if you—" His question was cut short by a deafening alarm. The station's emergency system, dormant for the 3 years since Theseus 7's commissioning, screamed to life. "Pressure breach in Section C." The station AI announced, its normally pleasant voice now sharp with programmed urgency. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Lyra's coffee mug shattered on the floor as the first impact hit, throwing her against the wall. Dominic was already moving, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the emergency pods. "What's happening?" she shouted over the blaring alarms. "Debris strike," Dominic replied, his engineer's mind already calculating scenarios. "Big one from the feel of it." The corridor ahead suddenly depressurized, emergency bulkheads slamming shut with pneumatic finality. Lyra felt her ears pop as the station's containment systems fought to maintain pressure. "This way," Dominic redirected, pulling her down a maintenance shaft. "There's a secondary pod bay in Section E." Through the viewport, Lyra caught a glimpse of the devastation. A massive debris field, likely from an unmapped asteroid collision, had torn through the station's central hub. Theseus 7 was breaking. Apart segments drifting away from each other in the void. They reached the secondary bay just as another impact rocked the station. With practiced efficiency, Dominic prepped the emergency pod while Lyra secured what research data she could on a portable drive. "We need to go now," Dominic called, as the integrity warnings reached critical levels. The pod ejected just as their section of the station suffered a catastrophic breach. Through the viewport, Lyra watched in horror as Theseus 7, her home for the past 6 months, fragmented into drifting pieces of metal and composite materials. "Main engines damaged," Dominic reported grimly, hands flying over the control panel. "We've got maneuvering thrusters and life support, that's it." Lyra swallowed hard, the reality of their situation sinking in. "Communications?" "Short range only. The main array was in the central hub." They were stranded, drifting in the void between worlds, with only a distress beacon broadcasting their location to an empty sector of space. The nearest outpost was weeks away, even at full emergency power. "What's our trajectory?" Lyra asked, pulling up the navigational display. Dominic's expression darkened. "That's the other problem. The ejection wasn't clean. We're on a gradual descent toward Helicon." Helicon, the massive gas giant that dominated this system with its swirling storms and crushing gravity. Not an immediate death sentence, but a slow-motion one, as their path inevitably curved toward the planet's atmosphere. "How long?" Lyra asked. "At current velocity, we've got about 72 hours before we hit the outer atmosphere. 3 days. 3 days to find a solution, or be crushed by the enormous pressures of a gas giant." Lyra closed her eyes, trying to think through the panic rising in her chest. "We need to boost our signal somehow," she said finally. "Even if we can't change our trajectory, we need someone to know we're here." Dominic nodded, already considering possibilities. "The power cells for my equipment are in the storage locker. We might be able to rig something." They worked in practiced efficiency, 2 scientists accustomed to solving problems with limited resources. Hours passed as they cannibalized the pod's non-essential systems to amplify their distress signal. Outside, the gas giant grew steadily larger in their viewport, its swirling amber and teal storms mockingly beautiful. By the 20-hour mark, exhaustion had set in. Their makeshift signal booster was operating, but there was no way to know if anyone could hear them. With each passing hour, Helicon's gravity pulled them closer to destruction. Lyra found herself staring at the massive planet, its complex storm, patterns reminding her of the quantum field visualizations she'd been studying for years. There was something about the magnetic field interactions that nagged at her memory. "Wait," she said, suddenly straightening up from where she'd been dozing. "Helicon's magnetic field, it's unusual." Dominic looked up from the environmental controls he'd been monitoring. "How so?" "My research before Theseus. I was studying quantum entanglement for navigation purposes. Helicon has a unique magnetic field pattern that creates quantum resonance points in its upper atmosphere." "And this helps us how?" Dominic asked, though his tone was hopeful rather than dismissive. Lyra's mind raced through calculations. "If I'm right, we might be able to use the planet's magnetic field to amplify our signal. Not just boost it, but actually jump it across space." "That's not possible," Dominic said carefully. "Theoretically it is," Lyra insisted. "Quantum entanglement allows for information transfer across vast distances. I was developing a navigation system based on that principle before the funding was cut." She bit her lip, memories of academic ridicule surfacing. Everyone said it was impossible. Dominic studied her face for a long moment. "Well, considering our alternatives involve being crushed by atmospheric pressure, I'm willing to bet on impossible." They spent the next 12 hours reconfiguring their signal array, with Lyra programming the quantum entanglement parameters while Dominic modified the hardware. As they worked, the gas giant dominated more and more of their view, its gravitational pull becoming increasingly insistent. "If this works," Lyra explained, "our signal will resonate with specific quantum particles in Helicon's atmosphere, creating an entanglement effect that could carry our distress call across the system instantaneously." "And if it doesn't?" Dominic asked, tightening the last connection on their makeshift apparatus. "Then we get an amazing view of Helicon's clouds before we die," she answered with grim humor. The 48-hour mark came and went. Their trajectory was now unmistakably bringing them toward the outer layers of Helicon's atmosphere. Friction heating had begun to affect the pod's outer hull. "It's now or never," Dominic said, monitoring their descent. "The magnetic field intensity is approaching your specified parameters." Lyra took a deep breath and initiated the sequence. Their jerry-rigged antenna extended, catching the full force of Helicon's magnetic field. The pod's systems struggled under the power draw, lights flickering, as energy was diverted to the quantum signal generator. "Power levels critical," Dominic warned, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Hull temperature rising." Through the viewport, Helicon's upper atmosphere appeared as a hazy boundary they were rapidly approaching. The gas giant's storms were now visible in breathtaking detail. Massive cyclones large enough to swallow Earth's Pacific Ocean spinning in slow, hypnotic patterns. "Signal is modulating," Lyra reported, making final adjustments to the quantum parameters. "Field strength it's higher than predicted." The pod shuddered as they hit the outermost wisps of atmosphere, friction heating the hull to dangerous levels. Warning alarms blared as multiple systems approached failure points. "Lyra," Dominic called over the noise, "whatever you're going to do." "Almost there," she replied, her focus absolute as she fine-tuned the quantum signal. "The resonance pattern is forming. If I can just..." "There." A burst of energy surged through their makeshift array, the quantum particles aligning precisely with Helicon's magnetic field. For a moment, everything in the pod went dark as the power systems overloaded. Then the emergency lights flickered on, bathing them in red. "Did it work?" Dominic asked, checking systems that were rapidly failing. "I don't know," Lyra admitted, watching as their communications array melted under the strain. "Theoretically, our signal should have created a quantum echo that could be detected anywhere in the system. But there's no way to know if anyone heard it." Through the viewport, the swirling storms of Helicon grew ever closer. The pod's hull groaned under the increasing pressure, temperature warnings flashing across every display. "Well," Dominic said, reaching across to take her hand. "For what it's worth, I believe your theory works. Too bad we won't be around to collect the Nobel Prize." Lyra squeezed his hand, finding strange comfort in this human connection as they faced the void together. The hull temperature continued to rise as they descended deeper into Helicon's atmosphere, beautiful bands of color surrounding them as the gas giant prepared to claim them. A sudden jolt rocked the pod, different from the atmospheric turbulence they'd been experiencing. Lyra frowned, checking the external sensors. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't—" Dominic's response was cut short as the pod shuddered again, more violently this time. The viewport suddenly filled with a new sight, a massive hull of a ship appearing from nowhere above them. A metallic clang reverberated through the pod as a tractor beam locked onto them, halting their descent into Helicon's crushing depths. "Distress signal received," a female voice crackled through their failing communication system. "This is Captain Naomi Vega of the salvage vessel Artemis. Hang tight. We're pulling you out." As their pod was drawn into the larger ship's cargo, Bay, Lyra, and Dominic stared at each other in disbelief. "It worked," Lyra whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "The quantum entanglement actually worked." Dominic laughed, the sound both exhausted and exhilarated. "I guess being proven right beats dying any day." The pressure around the pod eased as they were brought into the pressurized bay of the Artemis. Through the viewport, they could see figures in salvage suits approaching. "So," Dominic said as they prepared to meet their rescuers, "what other impossible theories are you working on, Dr. Cassini?" Lyra smiled, the weight of academic ridicule finally lifting from her shoulders. "Oh, you have no idea, Mr. Reeves, no idea at all. Harmonic resonance." Captain Naomi Vega had salvaged many things during her 15 years piloting the Artemis through the outer systems: derelict ships, abandoned mining equipment, forgotten cargo, but never living scientists on the verge of being crushed by a gas giant's atmosphere. "You're either the luckiest or the smartest people in the sector," she remarked, studying the pair who sat wrapped in thermal blankets in her ship's medbay. "Probably both." The woman, Dr. Lyra Cassini, according to the Theseus 7 manifest, had barely spoken since the rescue, her dark eyes constantly calculating something invisible to everyone else. The man, Dominic Reeves, had been more forthcoming, explaining their desperate situation and the unorthodox solution they'd attempted. "Quantum entanglement communication," Naomi repeated skeptically. "Across space without relays." "I know how it sounds," Dominic said, "but it worked. The proof is that you found us." Naomi shrugged. "What I found was a signal unlike anything I've ever encountered. It didn't come through standard channels, it just appeared like it had always been there." She glanced at Lyra. "My navigation officer said it was like the signal existed at every point in space simultaneously." This finally drew Lyra's attention. "That's exactly what quantum entanglement does," she said, her voice soft but intense. "Information doesn't travel through space, it exists in both locations at once. The particles are entangled regardless of distance." Naomi wasn't a physicist, but she recognized the implications. "If that's true, you've just revolutionized deep space communication." "And navigation," Lyra added. "With a proper network of quantum beacons, ships could plot jumps with perfect accuracy regardless of distance or interference." The potential was staggering. Current interstellar travel relied on a complex network of relay beacons, with ships making numerous small jumps to reach distant destinations. The process was slow, expensive, and dangerous when beacons failed or drift occurred. "You should eat," Naomi said finally, nodding toward the synthesized food her medic had prepared. "We'll reach the Meridian outpost in about 30 hours. You can arrange transport back to your home system from there." She left them to their meal, making her way to the bridge where her first officer, Jasper, waited with an uncharacteristic frown. "Problems?" she asked, dropping into the captain's chair. "Interesting traffic on the emergency bands," Jasper replied, bringing up a display. "Seems the Theseus Corporation is offering a substantial reward for the recovery of any personnel or data from their recently compromised research station." "Recently compromised?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. That station was hit by debris. We saw the wreckage field. That's not what they're saying. Jasper tapped the screen. According to this, the station suffered a containment failure due to unauthorized experimentation. Naomi's eyes narrowed. They're covering something up and looking for someone to blame. Or looking for something specific, Jasper suggested. A corporation doesn't offer 5 million credits for rescued personnel out of the goodness of their heart. 5 million credits? Enough to refit the Artemis completely or even buy a newer, faster ship. Naomi drummed her fingers on the armrest, considering the implications. Set a course for Meridian as planned, she decided, but keep monitoring those transmissions. I want to know who else might be looking for our guests. In the medbay, Lyra sat with Dominic's datapad, frantically inputting equations while he slept. The miraculous rescue had confirmed what she'd only theorized before. Quantum entanglement could be practically harnessed for communication across vast distances. The implications were enormous and dangerous. She knew the Theseus Corporation well enough to understand they wouldn't let such technology escape their control. Her research had always been proprietary, funded with corporate credits that came with thick contracts and confidentiality clauses. You haven't slept, Dominic observed, waking to find her still working. I can't, she replied, not looking up from the calculations. I need to document everything while it's fresh. The quantum resonance pattern we established with Helicon's magnetic field. It shouldn't have worked at all, but it did. Which means all my previous assumptions about entanglement stability were wrong. Dominic sat up, studying her with concern. Lyra, we nearly died. Maybe take a moment before diving back into the research? She finally looked up, her expression intense. You don't understand. This changes everything. Interstellar navigation, communication networks, possibly even energy transmission. If this falls into the wrong hands— You mean the hands that funded your research in the first place? Dominic asked gently. Lyra fell silent, the ethical dilemma clear. Her work had been supported by Theseus Corporation, a conglomerate with interests in everything from colony development to military contracts. They'd dismissed her quantum entanglement theories as impractical and redirected her research toward more immediately profitable applications. Now she had proof they were wrong. We need to talk to Captain Vega, she said finally. I don't think. We should go to Meridian. Before Dominic could respond, the ship's alarm system activated, a pulsing red light flooding the medbay. Attention all crew. Naomi's voice echoed through the intercom. Unidentified vessel approaching at high velocity. Battle stations. Dominic and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying toward the bridge, despite the protocol that should have kept them confined to the medbay during an alert. No one stopped them. The Artemis had a small crew and everyone was focused on the approaching threat. They arrived to find Naomi standing before the main viewport, hands clasped behind her back as she studied the approaching ship. Theseus Corporation, security vessel, she said without turning. They're hailing us, demanding we prepare to be boarded for inspection. Captain, Lyra stepped forward. I believe they're after my research, the quantum entanglement technology. It's valuable beyond measure. 5 million credits valuable according to the bounty they've posted, Naomi replied dryly. Though I suspect the technology itself is worth far more. You can't turn us over to them, Dominic insisted. The debris field that destroyed Theseus 7, I'm starting to think it wasn't an accident. Naomi turned, her expression unreadable. Are you suggesting Theseus Corporation destroyed their own research station? Not the whole station, Lyra realized, horror dawning on her face. Just the sections with personnel who knew about my research but weren't essential to developing it further. If they have my data but not me. They could develop the technology without sharing credit or control, Dominic finished. Standard corporate practice. Eliminate the innovator once you have the innovation. That's a significant accusation, Naomi said. And not one I can verify. Captain, Jasper called from the communication station. They're demanding immediate response or they'll consider us hostile. Naomi studied them both for a long moment, her gaze calculating. If, hypothetically, I decided not to hand you over, what would you offer instead? The quantum navigation technology. Lyra said without hesitation. Exclusively, it could make the Artemis the fastest ship in known space. A slow smile spread across Naomi's face. That's an interesting proposition. Jasper, how's our fuel situation? 3/4. Capacity, Captain. And our proximity to Helicon? Still within the outer gravitational influence, approximately 0.4 AU. Naomi nodded. Decision made. Tell our friends we're experiencing mechanical difficulties and we'll prepare for boarding. Then route all available power to the engines. We're going to need a head start. She turned to Lyra. Dr. Cassini, I believe you have a quantum navigation system to build. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. While the Artemis accelerated away from the pursuing Theseus vessel, Lyra and Dominic worked to adapt the ship's existing navigation systems to incorporate quantum entanglement principles. This is insane, Jasper muttered, watching them dismantle essential components of the navigation array. We're crippling our conventional systems for a theoretical technology. Sometimes you have to break things to make them better, Naomi replied, though her own doubts were evident in the tight set of her jaw. How's our pursuit? Gaining slowly, Jasper reported. Their engines are military grade. They'll overtake us before we reach the asteroid belt. Then we don't reach the belt, Naomi decided. Plot a course for Helicon's upper atmosphere, the same region where we found our guests. Jasper's eyes widened. Captain, that's suicide. The Artemis isn't rated for gas giant atmospheric conditions. Neither was their escape pod, Naomi countered. Yet they survived long enough for us to find them. Have faith in our new navigator. In the makeshift laboratory that had once been the ship's secondary cargo hold, Lyra worked with single-minded focus, reprogramming the ship's systems while Dominic modified the hardware to handle the quantum calculations. Even if this works, Dominic said quietly so only she could hear, we're asking them to risk everything on untested technology. Technology that could kill us all if it fails. It won't fail, Lyra insisted, though doubt gnawed at her confidence. The quantum entanglement they'd achieved had been specific to Helicon's unique magnetic field. Replicating it without the gas giant's natural amplification would be exponentially more difficult. We're approaching Helicon, Naomi announced, entering the cargo hold. The Theseus vessel is still in pursuit, but they're showing signs of hesitation. I don't think they want to follow us into the atmosphere. They don't need to, Dominic said, grimly. They just need to wait for us to either come back out or be crushed by the pressure. Naomi nodded. So I gathered. Which means your system needs to work on the first try, Dr. Cassini. No second chances. Lyra met her gaze steadily. I need access to your ship's full power grid. Everything except life support and minimal maneuvering thrusters. That's asking a lot, Naomi replied. It's requesting what's necessary, Lyra countered. Quantum entanglement requires enormous energy to establish. Once established, it's self-sustaining, but the initial connection demands power, substantial power. After a moment's consideration, Naomi nodded. Jasper won't like it, but it's your show now. What's your plan exactly? Lyra brought up a holographic display showing Helicon and its complex magnetic field patterns. We're going to use Helicon's magnetic field to amplify our quantum signal, just like before. But instead of sending a message, we're going to create a quantum tunnel, a pathway that connects 2 points in space without traversing the distance between them. Like a wormhole? Naomi asked skeptically. Similar in concept, different in execution, Lyra explained. We're not bending space-time. We're exploiting the fundamental properties of quantum particles that exist in multiple states simultaneously. Dominic, seeing Naomi's confusion, simplified. Think of it as creating a door where there wasn't one before. Step through here, emerge, somewhere else instantly. And where exactly would we emerge? Naomi asked the obvious question. The Persephone Nebula, Lyra replied without hesitation. It's rich in the particular quantum particles we need for this to work, and it's outside Theseus Corporation's patrol zones. The plan was audacious, borderline insane, exactly the kind of gamble Naomi Vega had built her reputation on. She gave the authorization, and Jasper reluctantly rerouted power to Lyra's experimental system. The Artemis descended into Helicon's upper atmosphere, the massive vessel shuddering as it encountered the same turbulent conditions that had nearly destroyed Lyra and Dominic's escape pod. Behind them, the Theseus security ship maintained distance, unwilling to risk the same dangers but equally unwilling to abandon their pursuit. Hull integrity at 82% and falling, Jasper reported, his voice tight. We have maybe 10 minutes before critical systems start failing. Quantum field initiating, Lyra announced, watching the energy patterns form on her display. Captain, I need you to take us deeper, where the magnetic field lines converge at the southern pole. That's well beyond our safe operating parameters, Naomi warned, even as she adjusted their course. Safety was never part of the equation, Lyra replied, her focus absolute as she fine-tuned the quantum parameters. A little more. There. Hold. This position exactly. The ship groaned under the atmospheric pressure, warning lights flashing across every console. Outside the viewport, Helicon's magnificent storms swirled in hypnotic patterns, ribbons of amber and teal energy dancing around the ship. Power at maximum, Dominic reported, monitoring the flow to Lyra's jury-rigged quantum array. Magnetic. Field intensity is perfect. It's now or never, Lyra. She took a deep breath and initiated the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a pulse of energy unlike anything they'd experienced before rippled through the ship, leaving a strange distortion in the space directly ahead of them. What is that? Naomi asked, staring at the visual anomaly that resembled heat waves on a summer day. That, Lyra said with a mixture of awe and vindication, is our quantum tunnel. Take us through, Captain. Quickly. Naomi hesitated only briefly before engaging the thrusters. The Artemis moved forward into the distortion, the ship shuddering as it crossed the quantum boundary. For a heartbeat, reality seemed to fragment around them. Lyra felt simultaneously present and absent, as if her consciousness existed in multiple places at once. Then, with a lurch that sent everyone stumbling, the Artemis emerged from the distortion. The gas giant had vanished from the viewport, replaced by the spectacular vista of the Persephone Nebula, its clouds of cosmic dust illuminated by the light of newly forming stars. It worked, Dominic whispered, hardly believing his own eyes. We actually quantum tunneled across 17 light-years of space. Jasper was frantically checking the navigation systems. Position confirmed. We're in the Persephone system. The journey should have taken weeks at maximum FTL. And our pursuit? Naomi asked, though the answer was obvious from the empty sensor readings. No sign of the Theseus vessel, Jasper confirmed. They're either still orbiting Helicon or they attempted to follow us and didn't make it through. The implications hung in the air between them. Lyra's quantum technology hadn't just allowed them to escape, it had revolutionized space travel itself. A journey of weeks compressed into seconds. Distance rendered meaningless by the fundamental properties of quantum physics. So, Naomi said, breaking the stunned silence. I believe we had a deal, Dr. Cassini. This technology exclusive to the Artemis. Lyra nodded slowly, still processing the success of her theory. With modifications, the quantum tunnel is temporary. It collapses after a single use. We'll need to refine the system to make it practical for regular navigation. Which means we're partners now, Naomi concluded. My ship, your science, a mutually beneficial arrangement. She extended her hand. After a moment's consideration, Lyra shook it. Partners, she agreed. Though you should know what you're getting into. Theseus Corporation won't stop looking for me or for this technology. What we've done here, it changes everything about interstellar travel, communication, possibly even warfare. I'm counting on it, Naomi replied with a confident smile. The Artemis has always sailed the edges of known space. Now we get to redefine those edges. Dominic stepped forward. If I'm not interrupting this budding partnership, might I suggest our first order of business? We need to reach out to independent scientific authorities with evidence of what Theseus Corporation did to their own research station. And we will, Lyra assured him. But first, we need to perfect this technology. Make it stable, reliable, and keep it out of corporate hands. As the Artemis drifted among the star-forming regions of the Persephone Nebula, its crew and passengers contemplated the journey ahead. They had escaped immediate danger, but had entered a new realm of possibilities and threats. Lyra found Dominic later in the observation lounge, staring out at the nebula's swirling colors. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, joining him by the viewport. "About quantum tunneling across 17 light-years with experimental technology?" He chuckled. "Only a few thousand." She smiled, the expression lighter than he'd seen since they'd met on Theseus 7. "You know what I realized during all this? For years I've been trying to prove my theories to academia, to corporations, to anyone who would listen. I was so focused on validation that I forgot why I started studying quantum physics in the first place." "And why was that?" he asked. "Wonder," she replied simply. "The pure amazement of discovering how the universe works at its most fundamental level. Today I felt that again. That moment when theory becomes reality, when the impossible becomes possible." Dominic nodded, understanding. "So what comes next for the brilliant Dr. Cassini?" She turned from the viewport to face him fully. "Partnership with a salvage captain, refining impossible technology, staying one step ahead of corporate hunters. And," she added with a slight smile, "continuing the conversation we started before our pod was pulled from Helicon's atmosphere." "About my other impossible theories?" he asked, returning her smile. "About everything," she replied. "It seems we have the time now, and a universe of possibilities ahead." As the Artemis charted its course through the nebula, Lyra Cassini contemplated the quantum equations that had saved their lives and changed their futures. The universe, she had learned, was stranger and more wondrous than even she had imagined. And like the quantum particles she studied, its potential existed in multiple states simultaneously, all waiting to be observed, understood, and explored.